What's going on, everybody? FYB presents Wise Word Wednesdays, a quick live stream to help you get closer to accomplishing your dreams. Man, we have another great episode for you today. I'm super excited. I think this is episode number 15 that we are recording. One of those, I think it's 14 or 15, but I think it's 15. But I'm super excited for today's episode, man. Listen, um, before I get into the amazing guest that I have for you this evening, I want to say thank you to every single person that takes the time out of their day to watch these Wise Word Wednesday shows or to listen, whether you're watching on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, on Twitter Live, or whether you're watching or listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just know that I'm super thankful that you took the time out of your day to listen to the things that we have to say, that myself and my guests have to say. um, you could have did anything, but you chose to be here with us. So I want to say thank you so much for that. I also want to encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to hit that subscribe button. You can follow the Wise Word Wednesday YouTube channel. You can hit that like, and if you feel compelled to, please leave a comment as well too. When you hit the like button, or when you leave a comment, or even when you subscribe, you're allowing the algorithms to see and to show that we are doing some great work here, and that others can get access to this information a little bit quicker. It'll show up on their algorithms as well too. So it's super helpful by doing that. And there may be times where you may not necessarily be interested in the things that we have to say, but that doesn't mean that your friend that's following you, or that you're following, might not get some type of love, or might not get some type of encouragement, or might not get some type of nourishment from what we are providing. So I just want to say, if you can, hit that like button. Make sure that you subscribe. You can also follow us. Follow me on the Joe Spider underscore FYB Instagram page. So with that being said, I'm super excited for the guest that I have with you, man. I've been following this brother for a while via online, but we've definitely seen each other in person even before that quite a few times. But this person really does some great work in regards to the space of mental health. And it's interesting that this episode, right, is happening right now because I believe it's like Males Mental Health Awareness Month, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw it online. Everybody, every month got something, but I think it's Males Mental Health Awareness. So this person that I have is going to talked a little bit about the mental health space. He is a social worker. He got his bachelor's degree and his master's degree, right? Master's in social work. So he's done some amazing things in the community of Sacramento, but just also doing an amazing amount of work online. His online presence, I would definitely encourage you to follow him if you can. But ladies and gentlemen, look no further. I'm going to ask that you make some noise for my guy, Mr. LaVontae Hill. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, my brother. I appreciate you for the time, man. I'm excited. Like I said, I'm grateful. I'm ready.
No doubt, man. I'm super excited as well too, because we've seen each other obviously quite a few times in passing, and doing, doing this work that we do, whether it's uplifting people, whether it's just pouring into them positively, or just helping our community in a variety of different ways. We've definitely seen each other. So I'm glad that we finally got a chance to collaborate on the Wise Word Wednesday show. But tell the people, if you don't mind, a little bit more about you. Who is King Hill? Who is Mr. Hill?
All right. So my name is LaVontae Hill. I'm born and raised from Richmond, California, impoverished community. So for me, really, I'm a mental health therapist. I've been that for half a decade. I'm an individual who went to Sacramento State for my bachelor's. I went to get my master's from the University of Southern California. Really, I'm just an individual who's a wounded healer. That's something that I love to say. I'm a light bringer. I really like to help. I'm in the business of healing, in the business of serving. So really, I'm all about just being for individuals and also trying to do the best I can to help support and serve to just make individuals better, truthfully.
I love that. I love that, man. Especially definitely the part, being from Richmond, it's a small city, man. So
Yes,
I'm just
sir.
glad to see, what I'm saying, my fellow Richmond native out here, being successful, because you know, coming from where we come from, right? Black males haven't historically had the best reputation. And so being able to to come out of that and to go all the way from that to Sac State and then, you know, USC. I mean, I think that's super dope.
Mhm.
And I definitely encourage you to continue to tell your story, because I think there's a whole group of people out there who didn't even know that things like that are possible outside of athletics, right? Like we always
I
see
agree.
people that are like, you can go to USC on athletics, right? Or you can go to USC if you a dope hooper. But it's like, what if you just wanted to be really dope at mental health? What if you wanted to be really dope at being a social worker? You can also go to a school like Sac State and then go to a school like USC. So that's super dope, man.
Exactly. I agree.
So let's get started in regards to getting to understand your journey. You know, what got you on this journey of mental health?
So realistically, when I went to Sacramento State, my original major was kinesiology. So of course, being from Richmond, I always thought athletics was my calling point, right? I played
Mm.
basketball and multiple sports in high school, so I just thought, yep, I'm going to go do something within sports. However, it wasn't until I got a C letter grade in college, and I was like, yeah, this is not for me. This is not my major. In biology, I was like, yeah, this is not for me. And so I ended up going to my counselor, and honestly, I didn't know anything about mental health. Like, I didn't know anything about it. Of course, as you had said before, mental health is really not a thing that a lot of people understand, especially being from Richmond. It was really taboo. And so when I went to the Department of Social Work, in my eyes, the only thing I knew about social work was CPS. That was it. And so I felt like I've always worked with youth. I've always worked at the local YMCA's, Boys and Girls Clubs. I've done that for a while. And so for myself, when I went into the counseling office, when I went to social work department, I asked them, what are some different things I can do with social work? That's why I seen that you could do medical social work. And I was like, what is that? Like, what is the realm that I can do with that? And they had said, well, you can continue to work with youth, but you can do it in a field that's more medical as far as what you're already doing. And so at that point, really, that's where my journey started with mental health. That's why I really started to build an understanding of what it was. And I surprisingly was able to go to the job fair through social work. And I was able to find an internship that was in more of a clinical setting. And that's where that journey of mental health and understanding what it is began for me.
I love that because it's those subtle things, right? That causes us to be exposed to things that we didn't even know were possible to do as a career, right? I mean, obviously, me working in education, I really never considered something like what I do as something that could be done as a career. I just thought that like it was like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. Like I want to until I got to them, you know, got to college and started reading them textbooks, them old white laws, you know what I'm saying? Read that for all day and all night. I was like, this is not for me. Like, this is not what I see myself doing long term. And so, but it took one person who to expose you to the fact that you can work in the medical field of social work, right? Within mental health. And that literally opened up an entire door of possibilities that you had no idea existed. So I love that, man.
Mhm.
So when you talk about um, working in the field of social work in regards to like the medical, what what makes promoting positive ways to deal with mental health so important to you?
Truthfully, I mean, honestly, so for myself, and this is just like personal disclosure. And so I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder in 2019, September 2019 to be specific.
Mm.
And at that point is really when I started to understand how deeply mental health can show you the coldest parts of the world and just the coldest sides of yourself. And in that moment, really, I started to realize how negative I can be as a person, how negative just naturally you are as human beings. And so going through that experience, going through that journey of healing, going through the journey of honestly just trying to maintain, I started to realize how easy it was for me to go to this more negative side of thinking. And that really promoted a lot more of the positive ways of thinking. I really had to sit back and understand what are some of these things that I'm really grateful for? What are some of these things that are smaller things? And I had to redefine really my understanding of what happiness was, redefine what my understanding was of positivity. and what that was for me on my day to day. And that's why it's so important as I go throughout this journey of mental health and educating individuals and working with them. It's understanding and allowing them to know that in this journey, you're always going to be negative. It's so much easier to go to the negative because that's what our brains are really embedded to do. We're programmed to think that way. And so taking the route that is less traveled, which is taking a more positive route, it starts to really get things going within the ways that your thinking patterns go. And you really start to understand how it builds your resiliency, how it builds your ability to overcome a lot of adversity, how it builds your certain mental capacity for you to withstand certain stressors that come on a day to day that maybe you don't even perceive as stressors. And so I've started to learn all of these different brilliant things about what happens when you think more in a positive light. And of course, we're all humans, right? We have these negative ways of thinking. That's just natural. But to make the effort to be able to sit there and try to think more in a positive light, that is so difficult. And that's why I try to promote these better ways of how to think that way and do it in a way that's organic, not a way that's a facade or a way that feels like it's unnatural, just to do it in a way that is really structured towards the person. And it's really important because it improves your mental health in a lot of different ways. It improves your ability to maintain when you do have those episodes or those moments that are more difficult and just stressful for you.
No doubt. And I know that I mentioned earlier, I think this is, like I said, males mental awareness month, mental health
Mhm.
awareness month, I believe. And I'm reading this interesting book by Dr. Tiasan Johnson that talks about Black men specifically and some of the ways that we have been um, uh, negatively impacted by our society. And it's talking about just the mental and the physical abuse that we've taken as people within American civilization and within American society. And I it's interesting because oftentimes Black men's mental health is only focused on when that person has gone over the ledge, right? I'm talking about from a macro perspective. Obviously, we have individuals like yourself and like myself who are always trying to bring positive light right out there, but typically for males of the African diaspora in America, it's always after they've, you know, cause harm to someone or even to themselves before we say, oh, well, they had a mental issue or maybe they were going through something, and we even consider, right? Like when we, and it's typically only seen as just a stamp as opposed to a focus of the individual. So even this is a terrible example, right? But I'm just saying, but just an example to use, like R. Kelly, right? Like we know
Mhm.
that R. Kelly did some pretty terrible stuff, right? But we also know that he was abused when he was a child. And
Yep.
that's always seen as like a, oh, well, yeah, but, right? So it's a yeah, but in reality, it's like we need to understand the way that abuse can negatively affect someone, even though they're an adult, right? And of course, he should have done work and he shouldn't have abused others. But oftentimes it's seen as a, like almost not even a stop sign, almost like a yield sign before it's like they just keep going on to negatively it's essentially casting judgment on that particular individual. So how have you, kind of working in the mental health field, how have you seen Black men in regards to mental health?
Whew, man, I will honestly say the Black men that I've worked with, I work with youth, so ages 2 to 21. That's the age out range when working with myself. And so working with a lot of the Black men, honestly, they see mental health as taboo. They see it as it's not a thing, it's not a reality, right? But also it's so
Mm,
normalized within certain communities that the certain experiences that you go through is just what you have to go through. It's a rite of passage, right?
right.
When people get shot at or when you live in an impoverished neighborhood, you see more crime, you see more violence. That's normalized because at a certain point you become desensitized to it. And so when you're working and you're seeing all these different things that these children are experiencing and they're coming with, you know the reality with it, but it's so hard because you have families that constantly tell them, oh, that's not a thing. Or, oh, you're sad, go do something to make you happy. Oh, you're too young to be anxious. you're too young to feel nervous right now, right? All these different embedded type of ways of thinking to discredit or invalidate them, they start to believe all these things, right? You start to see these children that develop learn hopelessness, worthlessness, right? They have a lower self-esteem because when they try to reach out to their parents, when they try to reach out to these caregivers or people for support in the Black community, you honestly don't get a lot of feedback that's supportive. And see, as you talked about just the abuse that R. Kelly went through just throughout life, right? It really clicked in my head. Have you ever heard of ACEs before?
Have not.
Okay, so ACEs is a term that's utilized to describe adverse childhood experiences. And so it's a plethora of different experiences that are within physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. You have things like poverty, homelessness, you have incarceration within the family, divorce, and it goes on, right? All these different factors that show these certain detrimental outcomes to mental health, to your livelihood, to your health conditions. It has all of these different effects. And when it goes unchecked, you have all of these different chaotic ways that your body responds to it, right? So you're maybe in fight or flight a lot more. You start to see kids act out a lot more. They start to normalize certain behaviors as far as violence. Or maybe they're yelling a lot more because they've been in a household that doesn't know how to communicate when they're angry. And so you see these certain type of realities for children that are just of color because it's not starting at home or the communities don't support it. However, in a lot of the ways with some of the individuals of today that I work with, you notice that the youth, they're wanting to recognize it a lot more. But the hard part comes in when the family doesn't. So it invalidates them again. It takes away from their experience. And then the longer you go throughout that process, what starts to happen is you start to believe that, yeah, maybe it isn't that deep. Maybe it isn't that real. Maybe I shouldn't focus on it as much as I do. But that's the sad reality because it takes away from the entire experience of how they actually heal through it, how they actually cope through it, because what they're telling them at home is, now you don't speak about this, right? A hidden norm that I always see, or just a cultural norm that I've seen, I'm pretty sure you've seen yourself. Number one thing is what happens in the house stays in the house, right?
Stays in the crib. No
Stays
doubt.
at the crib, right? And so this certain type of way of thinking, what it does is it internalizes invalidation for that child, or the reality of I can't speak about what I'm going through. I can't talk about how I'm affected. And so you see that time and time again, just with children of color, whether it's adolescence, whether it's middle childhood, early childhood, this same type of ways of thinking that start at home that invalidate their experience, that take away from what they are as a whole, it starts to become their reality, and they find better ways to deal with that certain type of feeling, right? They act out, they go find gangs, they go into certain communities that are just not appropriate, but that gives them a sense of belonging. That gives them a place where they're recognized, where they're understood, because they're not getting it at home. And you see it constantly. This is what I work with every single day, that same reality. And it's a small majority of youth that honestly are able to make it through that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I didn't realize until I got to college that murder wasn't normal. I didn't
Man,
realize that death wasn't normal, that having family members that were incarcerated wasn't normal because, you know, a lot of the people that I know, this was the norm because they grew up in the in similar areas and circumstances that I grew up in. But until I got to college, where I was exposed to thousands of other people who had no idea what that felt like, and I was like, that's when it really hit me of like, oh wow, like I've been living in a subsidy of like violence, you know what I'm saying, of the human experience in regards to America.
and that it's a true thing, simply because honestly, the reality is like I said, you become desensitized to it. I'm in the same boat. I mean, I got to college and a lot of people like, oh, I was like, man, I got shot at before coming to college. I got shot at twice, right? When I was 12 and then when I was 18. So I was okay, I was normal. But for other
Right,
individuals, that was a shock. But for me, that
right.
was reality. That was what you had to go through. That was what reality showed you. I remember when I was a kid, I was about 15 years old. I had one of my young mentees that lived next door. Luckily, he came over to my house because his house got shot up 12 times that day.
Mm.
And for me, I wasn't scared at all. It was just like, oh, that's normal. It was surprising. It was, of course, a shock because I was young, but honestly, outside of that, it was normal. And so think about that. Nobody's processing that. Nobody's talking about that. You go outside the next day. Like, oh yeah, we go. We just gonna be back before the streetlights. And that's it. And what happens is when that goes unchecked, man, it starts to increase a lot more symptoms that you don't see. And that's a key thing that a lot of individuals that are of color have to understand is that the body keeps the score no matter what. When you're thinking about trauma, the body keeps the score. Doesn't that same experience that you got running from a dog when you were terrified at the age of 6 is going to get that. It's going to be that same exact feeling if you get chased by another dog when you're 20 plus, or when you're exposed to a certain violent experience that you thought you got over because the time went away. As soon as you get exposed to something similar, you'll get that same exact feeling, even if it's not that same experience, if you let it go unchecked.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I was having a a conversation, and I'm pausing. I'm gonna tell you now for y'all that's listening. I'm going way off script. These I ain't even none of these questions now I've asked LaVontae before. I'm going way off script, but it's just again the conversation, man. So
Of course.
again, I told you I'm reading this book by Dr. Tiasan Johnson, and I was having a conversation the other day with this great black woman, and she had said something, and I got triggered instantly by it. She said, I just I wish I could just be a man, life would be so easy. And I was just like, and I just immediately like stopped, and I just started listing a whole list of things that men experience that women don't even really consider. I talked about how, the suicide rate for men is higher amongst men. I talked about how men work the more physically dangerous jobs. I talked about how men die more on the job. I talked about how men serve in the army, men struggle academically, men are more likely to be incarcerated, men are more likely to suffer from violence. I talked about all these different things that the male experience is that she hadn't even thought about when saying, hey, a man's life is so easy. And I think that a lot of people don't necessarily realize that a lot of these men in the world are going um, unnoticed. They're going unseen. They're going in. They're literally invisible to everyone, because the things that the different things that they're internalizing, because they can't even talk about it because they're seen as less than if they talk about it for being emotional or being sensitive or crying. All these little things that create the human experience, all these things are being held within because they're afraid of how the world is going to see them or judge them.
I agree. I agree. And that's why a key piece is for men, at least from what I've seen, men oftentimes suffer in silence. Simple. That's probably the biggest piece of coping that a man will do. Isolation, not talking. I'm gonna just tough it out, right? I'm gonna thug it out. I'm good. We'll wake up tomorrow. That's a common
Mhm.
norm for men because there's always been the certain connotation of if you show that emotion, you're weak. If you cry because something really, really affected you on your heart, you're not a man. You're supposed to be the almighty powerful every single time, and you're supposed to be the provider. However, they never take into the account that even individuals that are providers also need support at certain times. Also, can't speak about certain things if someone's not opening them up to be able to feel comfortable to do so. Not superheroes, just individuals that the world has created this certain image, and now we see that that certain light that the world has put us in as men is not always the healthiest because it continues to create maladaptive coping, just ways of coping to get through, or ways of learning that we feel are normal, but in reality, they're hurting us the most.
Yo, it's crazy. I've been doing therapy now consistently, pretty much weekly for about 3 years now. Appreciate
Nice.
it, man. Yeah, about a little over 3 years now that I've been doing therapy, weekly therapy sessions, and my therapist is a black man. I specifically said I need to find a black male therapist who's going to understand or comprehend my experience as a black man, because I think oftentimes other people who black men confide in often downplay or dismiss their experiences, because, or at least how they internalize their experiences, because they're saying, hey, that's just you. And in reality, no, society does affect us differently than it might affect a white man or a white woman or even a black woman. And so that's why I was very, very intentional on who I selected as my therapist. But I've I'm learning that, when you talked about men coping in a variety of ways, a lot of those ways have been sexual promiscuity, right? Like men using, like, how many, oh, sorry, hold on, my dog is messing me up, but men using how many women they can sleep with as a coping method or mechanism for the types of pain and trauma that they're
Mhm.
experiencing in their lives. And it's interesting because at some point a man has to ask themselves, okay, how many is enough, right? Like, we pride ourselves as as men on the amount of women that we can obtain and sleep with, which is, you know, great to a certain extent.
Right.
But at some point, you're not satisfying the actual issue. You're not fixing the actual issue. You're just using
And
the amount of women that you've slept with to cope with the fact that maybe your family is broken, or maybe you don't have a father, or maybe your mother molested you, or maybe whatever x reason is. Maybe
right.
this girl broke up with me in the 6th grade and I've been hurt ever since, and or she cheated
Mhm.
on me in 7th grade, or you know what I'm saying, and I've been trying to claw my way out of this ever since by sleeping with as many women. Whatever the reason is, you're not actually fixing that issue. Instead, you're masking it. So
Mhm.
I really thought it was cool that you brought that up. But I mean, I'm sure that's just what you do. No,
Oh yeah.
from that perspective, for sure.
Oh yeah, you see it a lot. I mean, you just touched on the basis of different attachment styles, right? Individuals have attachment styles that are insecure, which are attachment styles where when they were younger, they didn't have that certain sense of connection, that certain feeling of understanding for somebody that was their supporting factor. You have individuals who have secure attachments who are able to understand their emotions, are able to understand what's happening, what's going on, why they're doing the actions they're doing. But also to what you were saying, there's a lot of different reasons why people mask these certain type of feelings or these behaviors, right? Society has a big role with that, but also it's hard to tap into what's going on internally if you've never sat down with yourself, if you've never had the opportunity to just ask yourself, why am I doing these things? It doesn't feel comfortable for you to do that. And when you're in this place of discomfort, what does your body do? Your body does whatever it can to give you a sense of control. And so, yeah, you go into certain behaviors, you go into certain actions that put a band aid on it because that's what your body knows. That's what you know. I can get control of this situation by doing X, Y, and Z, even though it's not benefiting me in the long run. I need to bring back my sense of control right now. And until you're able to really understand what that's doing for you and where that stems from the past, from these different experiences, you will always go back to it. And that's a common norm.
Wow, wow. Um, so I definitely encourage anybody that's out there, man, woman, boy, girl, whatever, child. I encourage you, man, to definitely get therapy. And I think it should be something that's readily available for every American, and it should be affordable for every American to have,
Mhm.
because we don't even, it just allows you to understand why you behave the way that you behave, so that you can, I'm not just going to say like it's going to fix the whole thing, but what I
Oh,
can say is
definitely.
it can allow you to understand it, and so you can begin to progress and take control of it, as opposed to it taking control of you.
It builds the awareness for you. Exactly. That's exactly what it does. It gives you the awareness of why do you act this way? Why do I feel this way when this happens? And it gives you somewhat of a roadmap that you have the control of. Okay, well, if I want to go into this and I want to heal around this area, I can. If not, then I know this is a place where it's uncomfortable, but at least I'm no longer ignorant to the fact of why I feel this way. Why do I feel triggered when this person says this? Or why can I not go into this certain confrontation without feeling like I'm personalizing the situation? Where does that come from? So it
Mm.
really helps you to bring the awareness of your full self. And hey, not everybody, enjoys the therapeutic aspect, but one thing is for certain is that it brings the awareness of what's going on inside of you, and you get the control back to figure out how you want to respond.
No doubt, no doubt. So let me ask you, let me get back to some of the questions I sent. I actually sent you instead of we freestyle it here. So what's a day in the life of LaVontae like? Like I know that on your social media you do like you do running, right? Like I know that you typically record a video of yourself and talking about mental awareness, mental health, and things like that. So what's a day in the life of LaVontae like?
Man, I get up 4:30 a.m., probably about 5:30 at the latest. Go to the gym. That's a big piece for me, especially when my mental health declined. Being just having physical exercise within my routine really helps significantly to kind of structure the way my brain is. Really, just put me on a path of where I have more clarity. Always make sure I eat before anything, no matter what. As soon as I get back from the workout, um, I got my little dog, so I always take him on a walk. That's kind of the regular, and then I just go to work on a day to day, Monday through Friday. And then outside of that is where I record my motivational speaking videos. Really going into that aspect, but really a lot of it comes to me just having a lot of moments where I sit alone with myself. Just like when I go to the gym, no music, no nothing. I want to be able to understand what I feel like when I get to these moments when I can't push forward, when I don't have the motivation and the motivation is just me. It's a lot of moments that I go throughout my day to day of where I'm trying to spend as much time with myself and my thoughts, because the way that I look at it is that my thoughts were a big piece as to why my mental health declined. And I don't want to go back into that space. And so I make sure that I focus on that on a day to day consistency, whether that's mindfulness, whether that's understanding what my thoughts are, labeling how I'm feeling in a moment, understanding why am I responding a certain way, why am I feeling a certain way about a situation, and not allowing it to manifest in a way that's detrimental or in a way that's more harmful for me. And then on top of that, I cook a lot. That's a big thing for me. So I cook on a day to day. I love to chef it up. That's really a big thing
Hey.
for me. I love it. I love it. That is my thing. And then also just reading. I think that really was a big piece that started to help build a lot of knowledge for myself and give me the clarity of understanding that it's a lot of different ways for me to gravitate towards education outside of school, outside of everything that kind of takes me away from being in my own space. And so reading has really put me on a path of where I can get the knowledge, but also I can really utilize it to implement kind of what starts to help me in my day to day. And on the last thing would be writing, just being able to sit alone with my thoughts and write down a few things that maybe I'm feeling, or maybe just some gratitude towards myself. Started to really implement saying I love you to myself. That was a key thing. Never
Mm.
done that before, and that really changed a lot. Actually, just speaking to myself in the mirror when I get up, or when I just have random moments while I'm walking in the house or walking past outside, that's been a key piece on my day-to-day life, just constantly being able to give myself the validation and affirmations, because I didn't do that at first. I thought that was something that men didn't do before, and it really has changed my perspective on a lot of different things about myself, knowing that I can sit there and tell myself I'm proud of me or I love me on a day-to-day basis has really improved my spirits, but also has improved my connection and relationship with myself.
Yeah, I definitely I've noticed that I started to I started to enjoy reading more. Let me say that because I didn't really read in high school. I didn't really read at all in middle school, elementary school. In fact, they thought I couldn't read because I really wasn't. And I found out when I got to college, it wasn't that I couldn't read, and as in and when they said I couldn't read, it wasn't the fact that I couldn't read the words. I couldn't comprehend the material, the message. And it was really the fact that I was uninterested or I was uninterested because the material didn't represent me. I didn't see myself reflected in that particular reading. I wasn't interested, but I could remember things like stats from basketball games or football games. I can remember how many rushing yards somebody had. So I understood data, I understood math, I understood these things. But when it came to reading certain things, I just wasn't interested. But when I found, I got my BA in sociology, when I found things, material that I
Hey,
was interested in, then I was like, oh, okay. Like I like this. What you mean? Like, Gloria Ladson Billings said what? And you mean Bell Hooks said this and then, and going in. And then I started to find a joy in that. So I would encourage, anybody that's out there, it's one thing to read because you have a reading assignment, but it's another thing to read something that you actually like, that you're actually interested in. And we don't even recognize it, but we read every day when you're on social media. You're reading the captions, right? You're reading the things that's going across the screen. So you read often. It's just a matter of whether or not you're interested in what you're reading. That's what's going to grab your attention. So I encourage you to find other things that you're interested in and read often. But I also encourage you to make sure that those be careful what you're reading as well too. Like you shouldn't be reading a lot of negative stuff because that's going to ultimately affect your psyche as well. Now, you took it a step when you say you go to the gym and don't listen to no music. That's tough. That is
oh,
tough because
I love it.
I have a music or a podcast that I have. I've been conscious of the playlist that I listen to now. Like I used to be listening to like some gangster stuff. Like when I was working out, I'm like, I'm ready. But I realized that doing that for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
it's no wonder why I was in a state of anger or frustration, right? Because I'm listening to people talk about robbing and killing and fighting and beating up my brother, right? For the smallest of reasons. It's no wonder why if somebody bumps into me at a club or at a venue, I'm ready to fight. So what I realized was when I took out that kind of music and maybe replace it with some R&B or replace it with a podcast that talks about something else that I really enjoy, my whole vibe and demeanor is different. Have you had anything like that since you not listening to music at the gym?
I think for myself, when it came to me not listening to music, that really stemmed from, as I said earlier, just my mental health and how that declined. And my older brother, he kind of gave me the insight of, sit alone with yourself, sit alone with your thoughts. It's so difficult to sit alone with your thoughts. I mean, we think about this, right? Every single day, we're listening to music, we listen to the podcast, we're watching TV. We really seldomly have any moments where we're just with us. And so for me, when I've had these moments of not listening to music, not listening to any type of stimuli when I'm working out, doing something that's really stressing and taxing on the body, I've really started to understand how my body really operates and how my mind operates when I'm under so much pressure. And it's allowed for me to really tap into building that connection of, oh, okay, this is how you're responding. When things become stressful, you either start to give up or you start to think a lot. And what happens, it makes the workout harder. Or when things become difficult, when you're like, let's say, for example, when I go on my runs, I run no music. Reason why is because what I've started to recognize is that every time I go out on that run, no matter how much I'm prepared, whether it's stretching, whether it's a good day, whether it's a bad day, whatever the case may be, something's going to pop up. Some obstacle is going to come in my way. And I am ready for every single moment because I'm clear, I'm here, and I understand that I cannot control these things that happen. I only can control how I respond. And so, with me not listening to music, that's a big piece. I can't control that this is going to hurt 10 times more because I don't got the motivation going crazy right now. That's slapping in my ear and I'm just going, right? It's
Right,
really
right.
me. It's me versus me. And so I've started to realize that for me doing that, I've started to realize how important it is for myself when I have these moments of stress or I have these moments of where I'm in altercations. I'm really calm. I'm just here because I understand what I feel like and I understand what happens in my mental when I get to those moments. And I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to the moment where I got to yell all day long. I don't want to get to the moments where I feel like I'm just beating myself up internally. And so the more I sit alone with myself, the easier it becomes for me to just have a better relationship with how I respond to things that would normally really evoke an emotion from me.
Wow, you putting me on game, man. I might have to try that. I think my
Oh, it's
next time
great.
at the gym, I'm gonna check it out, man. I'm gonna try to do no music, no, because usually, like, if I even just forget my headphones, I'll be like, "Well, I'm going back home. I cannot do it."
You see that? You see that? And that's a key piece. I was in the same boat. I used to listen to the podcast. I used to have my music going, and I felt like I could not go without it. And it was one day where I really, so I was watching this stoicism video, and this guy had said, do not become the what you've attained. And the thing is that you think about it, for example, right? You have all these athletes, right? And then when they leave out of high school and they're no longer an athlete, you have this imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? What is going on? I don't know who I am. Well, because you've identified with the attainment for so long. You've identified as just being an athlete, right? You've identified as being a student. So when that's taken away, what kind of person are you? Are you still yourself if you're not an athlete? Well, I look at it with my music as well. Can I not do a great workout if I don't have this as a motivator? If they take away the music aspect, am I no longer able to push myself to those full lengths? Am I no longer able to break those limits that I have and I've set because I don't have this one piece that keeps me away from everything? Right. And so when I took away that, that just opened up a door where I can go to the gym. Everybody's like, oh, my phone's about to die. I'm here. I'm there. I'm locked in with just me because it's myself versus myself. And I don't need anything else to motivate me other than, hey, I said I'm going to do this. My resolve is made. It's time to go.
Yeah, man, I'm going to give it a try. I promise tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's actually going to be my first day back. I tore my meniscus a few weeks ago. So
Man,
tomorrow's going to be my first day back and really like
okay.
trying to hit the gym hard. So I'm still in physical therapy, but I'm going to definitely check it out and let you know how it goes too,
Yeah, let me
for
know.
sure. So I
Let me
appreciate
know.
it. No doubt. Um, when you think about how life has worked out for you, what do you think the worst mistake you've ever made in life, either professionally or even personally?
I'll say, and I won't even call it a mistake. I'll talk more from the professional lens. I'll honestly say that one of my biggest mistakes or challenges that I felt I had or I was naive to when I first became a therapist was I had this idea that I could save everybody. Like I just had this
Mm,
internalized feeling like I could save everyone. And the reason why I picked this is because I had an eye opener when one of my clients had talked about suicidality. And I did everything in my power to really try to feed into this client, feed their soul, talk to them, try to change the days that I meet with them on more of a consistency that I could really be there. And everything did not work. And for myself, I beat myself up bad about it. And it wasn't until I really spoke to my supervisor at the time, he just explained to me that you can't help everyone. And being within this field, it doesn't mean that you're their superhero. It doesn't mean that you're their savior. It just means that you're there with them and you're going with them through the moment, regardless of what they choose, regardless of what their outcome and decision is. You're just being there with them. And for me, that was an eye opener throughout my entire life and everything that I do professionally because it really hurt me bad that I could not save every part of what this kid wanted to do and what they felt was the best, what and just be that light for them because I always felt like that was my purpose, being a light bringer, which I still feel today. But the reality opened up to me that you can't save everyone. You can't save people who don't want to be saved. You have to be able to understand that you can be there and you can be there to support. And I was so thankful that I was able to build that relationship with that client at the time, and they're doing amazing up until this day. But for me, I felt like I was bad as a clinician. I felt that I was horrible as a person because I went through school throughout my entire life, and I'm sitting here like, am I a fraud? Am I just not the person I believe I am? Am I lying to myself? But the reality is that I also had to check myself and understand I only can help as much as I can. And I can't help and force someone that doesn't want to be helped. And that was a reality that I had to understand early on. And it changed a lot of how I perceive things as a professional and just within my day to day.
Man, that's super critical. I even have that deal with this working in education, right? It's like, man, like I wanted every single person that I worked with, that I came in contact with, that I encountered, to be able to realize, like, yo, you can be the first in your family to go to college and you can be the person. But it's like, unfortunately, some people will get academically disqualified. Some people will get academically dismissed. Some people never come back to college. Some people, I mean, I have friends that I started in college with as undergrad that, that are no longer even here on this earth anymore in regards to the human form, because of, they got kicked out of college and then went back home, and how home is. And so definitely that was something that I had to learn as well too, was just like, bro, you can't save everybody. And if you try to have that mentality, like, I'm going to save everybody, you're ultimately going to hurt yourself the most, because it's an impossible task, right? It's something that's not possible. But like you said, being the tool for someone, being able to be there with someone, I'm here to provide opportunity for the people that I encounter. That's a way different perspective, because it's like, hey, I know that I can't save everyone, but I still want to be there for everyone that I come in contact with in case they need support in this particular way.
I agree, 100%.
No doubt, no doubt. With you sharing, the different motivational content online, how challenging is that for you, to kind of share your journey and experiences, with the world? Because oftentimes when you post things like that online, people seem to get the perception, this false perception, that things are perfect or things are always okay, or that, you know what I mean? I do the same thing, right? I post a lot of motivational content as well. And I think that people would always assume, like, I'm just 24/7 happy, or I'm just 24/7 inspired and motivated and ready to go. And
Right.
it's like, nah, bro, I was struggling yesterday with that, or I was struggling last week with such and such, or last month. And so I think it's how challenging is that for you? Do you ever get that? Do people have that perception of you, to think that, like, you are always smiling? And it's like, nah, bro, I be having some bad days
Man,
too.
I'm telling you, it's difficult, right? When you go into that space, because right, you expose yourself to the world. And I would say one of the biggest challenges is for myself is being vulnerable. And I think that just comes from my upbringing. It just comes from what my perception of a man is, or what was instilled into me. And so learning how to be vulnerable, that was a big piece with being able to share my story, being able to continue to do that, right? And talk about these challenges that I have, talk about my mental health, talk about these certain struggles that I have. And it's a certain perception that I think is created, right, based on the content, based on, how people perceive you as well. And for me, it's always been difficult, because I've always got anxiety around, oh, does this person think like I'm just this almighty person? Do I have to keep up this image? And the reality is that I try to be as authentic as possible, right? I mean, and I try to make sure that people understand, no, I struggle. I go through a lot of different challenges. I go through challenges day to day with my mental health. And that's why I say I'm actively working on this every day when I work out, when I do these certain type of regimens, because I know how difficult it is. I know how hard it is to build myself back up after going through these rough moments. And when I look at this journey, I try to make sure that I speak from my own experience, so that you also know, although it's so many positives that I talk about, I understand your experience. I hear your experience. I know exactly what that feels like, because, hey, just because I may look like I'm smiling right now, I probably went through the same thing you went through last week, right? It's just a different experience for me. And I try to make sure I can stay within that authentic realm for myself, because I don't want anyone to think that this journey is easy at all, especially with mental health. It is probably one of the most challenging, daunting, and difficult journeys to be on. But I also understand that it's worth it, and that I know where I want to be in life, and I will not allow for anything to stop me. And so that's what I try to instill into others as well, but also keep the mindset that, hey, it's going to be hard, man. You're going to suffer throughout this process, but the suffering is necessary. But it's also for a short time. You won't suffer forever. And that's a key piece of what I want people to know as well when I make this certain content, when I talk about the certain topics that I talk about. The suffering doesn't last forever. It's short term. It's here now, but you continue to progress and it won't be there later.
Absolutely. I think it's why I always encourage people not to get too high on the highs and not to get too low on the lows, right? But just to stay leveled, because even though the highs are really, really good, like they feel great, like you feel like you're on top of the world,
Mhm.
if you get too high on those highs, when the crash eventually comes, you feel like it's the worst thing that could ever happen and there's never going to be anything worse, and like it's not even worth living, and that's just not the truth, right? So that's why when you want to stay as level as you can, like it's okay to enjoy those highs, it's okay to enjoy those good moments and smile and to get excited and take that trip or do that event or whatever and be like, yeah, I love it. But you shouldn't base your reality off of, your long-term reality off of that high feeling, because that's just a temporary thing, right? And so when things eventually get low, again, same thing. It's like, hey, listen, like this, it's not always going to be bad like this, right? This is just temporary. It's just for now. Remember when you had fun that one time, you can get back up to that at some point, right? Or you remember when you were having a good day and nothing really, really big happened, but nothing really, really bad happened, but you still had a good day. You can get back to that point. But you just have to remember that this is just right now, and there's a bigger picture that you have to look at. So don't get too high on the highs and don't get too low on the lows, but just stay mellow, because the good and the bad is meant. Life is volatile. I mean, you're going to experience both. You have to experience both in reality.
That's a strong moment too. I think you make a very great point because it reminded me of when I was in therapy. My therapist, I was going through a really rough time, and she had told me simply simmer in those moments, simmer in the moments that are good, simmer in the moments that are bad, because it's
Hmm.
important to understand what impermanence is. Because these moments that are good, these too shall pass, and these moments that are negative or bad, these two will also pass. These moments are temporary. So these experiences are going to go on a continuum throughout this entire journey. So, like you said, don't be too happy and settle for these high highs, because then you'll be unexpected when you get those low lows. Just simmer in each moment and understand that it's all a part of the experience. These things are temporary and they will also pass.
So what are some things that keep you motivated when you're facing challenges, right? Because we're all human, so there are going to be times where we face those low lows, right? What do you personally do, that, or what is it that keeps you motivated and keeps you going when you face those challenges?
Really, I think back to when I struggled the most. That is probably the most challenging part of my life. When I first had been diagnosed in 2019, I did not want to do anything in life. I mean, I was smiling in your face, but everything inside of me was dead. And realizing and understanding that, I always tell myself, I'm not going back to that place. I cannot. I am unwilling to allow myself to go back to that place. And I constantly go into these moments of where I just ask myself, okay, this is how you're feeling right now. Feel that. Understand it. Just let that be. And then you can choose how you want to respond in the next 5 minutes or in the next 2 minutes. But I give myself that moment and I allot this time so that I can actually feel what it is that I'm feeling. And all the time it doesn't work. I'll be real. I'm gonna keep it a band. It does not always work. However, I'm
Right.
really intentional about me just recognizing that yes, I've been here. I've been in this moment. I felt this feeling before. This is no different than any other moment that I've had. And I constantly try to remind myself of that I don't want to go back to that same place I was in. I am 10 times better than I was back then, because right here in this moment is a moment I thought I would never be able to get to again. I didn't know what life would look like for me in the past. So I constantly remind myself of that no matter what, and I will continue to do it anytime life is difficult for me.
I love that. I have a similar experience as well. When when things get challenging for me, I always think back to when I was at my worst, and I always treat it like no matter what I'm going through now, I'm not that bad. So I know if I can get through that, I can get through this. Like there, and again, going back to being from where we're from, there are. I remember when I was in college, and there was there were people complaining about like tests, or complaining that they missed their homework assignment, or they missed class and they're going to get a lower grade. And I would be like, yo bro, I got a family that just died. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo bro, like I got a homie that's locked up right now. You feel me, doing a
Mhm.
10-year bid. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
class is not a problem for me. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Going to class, it's not the end of the world. Like, you know what I'm saying? So now, years later, when I find myself going through a stressful time, or I find myself just like in a challenge, I'm just like, bro, I've been way worse than this. So like I
Yep.
remember what it felt like to be in that moment. And so I know that what I'm feeling right now isn't that bad. So if I can get through that, I can get through this. And I just got to channel who I am, and just take a moment and breathe, and just remember what I'm capable of. And I also have to remember, there was a point in time in life where I thought it was going to be over, right? And
Yep.
everything that I've been able to accomplish since then, and the lives that I've been able to impact since that moment, I have to remember that none of that would have been possible if I would have gave up. And so that's why I can't give up now, because I know that these next 10 years, these next 15 years, right, are going to be so much more of the positive, so many more people's lives that I'm going to impact, so much more that I'm going to have to accomplish. So I can't give up now, because I know what it's like when I do decide to keep going.
Exactly. Speaking life into yourself. That's affirmations, man, on top of intentionality. That's exactly where it's at. That's where that resiliency lives. When you can sit there and be honest with yourself and say, "Yeah, I'm struggling. Like I'm going through some shit right now. I'm gonna be
Right.
honest. But guess what? It's not as bad as what it was before, right? And that's really what it is, being honest and being aware of the simple fact of it, but also being intentional to tell yourself, like, man, we're gonna get through this. May not look like how we wanted to, may
Right.
be a little bit tougher, but we're gonna get through this in the best way we can. We're gonna make it to tomorrow. And I'm good with
No
that.
doubt. No doubt. Um, from your perspective, you know, what's um, one of the coolest things about working in mental health, or working as a social worker?
Man, okay. So I will say personally for me, I really just love when working with youth and they have this aha moment, right? They have this moment of where,
Mm,
so I seen a lot of stuff growing up where kids were getting in trouble, kids were struggling, couldn't sit still in class, or they were always the at risk kids, right? And I build all this knowledge of understanding of where that comes from, right? Where you see what does ADHD symptoms look like, and these kids feel like, oh, that's an actual thing. Like I actually have that, or these are actual symptoms, and it gives them an identifier to what's actually going on, and it makes them see, oh, I'm not a problem, or oh, I'm not just this unicorn of a person, this magical person that nobody can relate to. No, these experiences are real experiences, these symptoms. And so when I have these moments when I'm able to educate these kids and I'm able to really help them do better in life from an aspect of their own mental capacities, man, that it feels so great because when you instill hope into somebody that was hopeless or that learned what hopelessness is and that was their everyday life, and they come to you and they say, well, I feel better today. Or I say, for example, I had a client a long time ago who really struggled a lot and struggled a lot with just in terms of suicidality, in terms of like depression, things of that nature. And to have that client feel like could not do anything in life and just life was not meant for them, to now be flourishing and doing so well in life, progressing and completing all the goals that they set out to do, that right there makes everything worth it. And I love that aspect. I just love healing. I love being able to feed into the youth because man, that's the future, but also being a part of their journey and their story makes everything that they go through worth it. Because a lot of the times, a lot of people don't get to share their story. And for me, I love to do the storytelling aspect. And so me just being a pivotal piece, a part of their story, and it may not even a pivotal piece, just a small piece that really has helped ignite everything that goes to their futures, everything that goes to them building themselves up, man, it's worth it. And I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. Honestly, it's probably the greatest feeling for me, especially with me looking at myself as this wounded healer. I really get to feed into that. And I love that aspect, just being a therapist and everything that comes with it.
Absolutely, and I love that too. And again, I love the fact that you refer to yourself as a wounded healer. You know, you're not coming as this person who's like, oh, I've been able to have the shield from everything, and I've got the super shield to be able to help you block everything out. But it's like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through it too, but
Yep.
maybe I can pour some of the ways that I've been able to cope, or not cope, but ways that I've been able um, to help process this. Maybe I can help give you some of those tools as well too. So I love that for sure.
Relatability, man, it's essential. A lot of people don't think you relate, and especially in today's time, everybody is all of these other things. But the reality is hurt is hurt, stress is
Mm.
stress, trauma is trauma. None is greater than the other. I understand and I hear you. And as long as they know that, we on the same level ground, regardless if I'm the therapist, you're the client. We both here.
No doubt, no doubt. Um, Another question I want to ask you is, what's one piece of advice or information that you can give to others to help them comprehend the lifestyle or challenges of a social worker?
Man, it's I'll say just as a social worker, man, oh, that's tough. Okay. So I'll say the biggest thing is it's really difficult to meet people where they're at when they're not allowing for you to do so. And I think as a
Mm.
social worker, man, we really build on these values of seeing the person as a whole entire person, seeing their experience as a whole full experiences. They're more than just what they went through. They're this entire other person. And as a social worker, you have to see those things within them, or at least you want to, right? And being a social worker, I'll definitely say this is a purpose driven work, no matter what, is passion filled. And if this is a job that you actually understand, and this is a life that you actually want to do, that purpose is going to drive you when things become challenging. That purpose is going to drive you when that individual doesn't feel like you can meet them where they're at. You'll go above and beyond. And that's just how I look at social work. It's those individuals that wear capes, but sometimes they're not in the best light. But it really comes down to the purpose, the person who has the idea in their mind that this is a purpose for what I'm doing. And that's just how I look at social work when it comes to like challenging moments.
I love that. I love that. And the last question is, if there was a wise word that you could leave the audience with about anything in life that you think is important, what would that word or words be?
So I would say this. I would say courage is the door right in between fear and bravery. One can't coexist without the other. The
Mm.
reason why that's so important is because a lot of the times when we do certain actions or when we're trying to try things out or just go into this way of living that we want to, we forget that in order to do that, you also have to take in some of that fear. But just because you're fearful doesn't mean that you're not brave, because courage has both of them. So that nervousness that you get to walk into that next stage of life, that's also a part of courage. And when you go into there and you take that step, that's when you open the door for bravery. So just understand that as you go throughout life, that just because you're fearful to take that step doesn't mean that you're not courageous. It means that you're actually right on process and target to get everything that you want.
Man, that was a word, brother. That was a word.
Come on, come on,
Talk
man.
heavy. You were talking heavy, brother.
Come
Oh
on.
man. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that, man. I genuinely appreciate you, taking the time. And honestly, we have to do this again because
Yeah,
just
please.
the conversation flow is just so dope. And I hope that people can hear that through what they're listening to right now or watching. This has been really, really good, especially for this being, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I think this is definitely worth it, man. And I genuinely appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to um just seeing the things that you're going to do over time, right? Seeing the growth in yourself and in your work and what you've been able to put online, but also the workshops that you're doing and will do in the future, man. I think that a lot of our people need to see Black men from a space of empowerment, but also while still balancing the trauma that they've dealt with in life previously, right? And that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. They need to see that, again, I'm a wounded healer, right? Like I'm somebody who has gone through it, and is going through it on a daily basis, but I'm still here, not only for myself, but I'm here for you. And I think that when people can see more Black men taking those type of leaps, I think that
Yep.
our society will and our civilization will be better.
Breaks the stigma. Breaks the stigma, man. I definitely agree with you. Especially the wounded healer is such a powerful like term. It's such a powerful phrase, because really, at least in the realm of therapy, in the field of therapy, a key thing to understand is that in order to help somebody that's hurt, you must also understand what that hurt feels like. And
Mm,
so, thinking about a wounded healer, how can you help heal someone that you've never been in an experience of what hurt actually feels like? And so when I use that label and when I really speak life into that word of a wounded healer, it's not a negative connotation. It's really so inspiring because it's really to show you that that hurt that you're going through, somebody else knows what that pain feels like, and you're not alone in that fight. You got a dog in the fight, but somebody's willing to go through it with you. And for somebody to go through it with you that doesn't know you at all, especially in the Black community, especially with somebody that doesn't want anything from you, that right there changes the way that your outlook on everything, especially for a lot of the Black individuals that I work with. Man, to see that I'm just somebody that can talk to them about certain things or understand their experiences, the way that I look, the way that I dress, the music that we're talking about, and I'm going down to their level, that right there opens their eyes up to anything that they can do whatever they want to set their minds to because they're now exposed to something that's outside of their reality. Someone's now helping them heal on something that their family has told them doesn't even exist. And that changes the perspective and that changes the entire game.
A1, brother. A1, man. Yeah, we have to do this again, man. I genuinely
Please, I'm
appreciate you.
grateful to you, my
Um,
brother.
yeah, you're killing it, bro, and you're gonna do some great things. Anything you got coming up that you want to let the people know about?
Man, honestly, for the most part, content coming out this week, man, it's going to be real heavy. It's going to be beautiful in the aspect of really just talking about what love is from a male's perspective, why the difficulties are for individuals to just say they love themselves, and really
Mm.
what that means and why that is so powerful. So that's really the biggest thing that I have coming out at least this week. It's a lot of things to stay tuned with. I want to do a lot more workshops. So yeah, that's going to be some big stuff coming up.
No doubt, man. I appreciate you. FYB presents Wise Word Wednesdays. I'm gonna leave you with a we fresh, and I love you.